Let's watch the MotoGP race at Mugello. 24 motorcycles worth approximately $2 million each, ridden by the most skilled motorcycle racers on Earth, at speeds approaching 360 kilometers per hour. And Jake is thinking about his F1 economics video, about factory teams spending $145 million and losing $45 million a year on racing operations. And he is wondering whether MotoGP works the same way. The answer is completely different, and the reason it's completely different reveals something fundamental about how motorsport economics actually work, and why the same sport can support two completely separate economic universes, operating on the same grid, in the same race, under the same rules, simultaneously. Today I am going to decode both of those universes, and show you why the economics of MotoGP are simultaneously the most fascinating and the most precarious in professional motorsport. The two-tier system that defines everything. Here is the structural reality of MotoGP economics that most fans never think about, and that shapes every financial decision in the paddock. There are factory teams, and there are satellite teams, and they are operating completely different businesses that happen to share the same race weekend. Factory teams are funded directly by motorcycle manufacturers, Ducati, Honda, Yamaha, KTM, and Aprilia, and they exist not primarily as racing operations, but as the most extreme and visible expression of each manufacturer's engineering capability. A factory MotoGP team at Ducati, which has dominated the championship for the last 3 seasons, spends between $80 and $120 million annually, and considers that spending not as a racing budget, but as a research and development investment. The technologies developed for MotoGP, the aerodynamic concepts, the electronic control systems, the material science, the engine management strategies, flow directly into the motorcycles that Ducati sells to consumers, and the racing success that results drives motorcycle sales in a way that no amount of traditional advertising could replicate. Ducati's market share in the premium motorcycle segment has increased significantly during the years of its MotoGP dominance, and the value of that brand enhancement, measured against the cost of the racing program, makes the economics defensible in a way that losing $45 million on an F1 team is also defensible. As a marketing investment, the satellite team economics. Here's where MotoGP economics become genuinely extraordinary and genuinely precarious. Satellite teams, the independent racing operations that fill out the 24 bike grid alongside the factory entries, operate on a completely different financial model. A satellite team like Pramac Ducati or LCR Honda or Trackhouse Racing does not develop its own motorcycle. It purchases or leases machinery from a manufacturer at a cost that varies depending on the relationship and the spec of equipment provided. A satellite team receiving current specification factory equipment might pay between $3 and $8 million per season for the machinery. A team receiving year-old specification equipment, sometimes described as a customer bike, might pay between $1 and $3 million, and the team must then fund the entire operation. Rider salaries, team personnel, travel, logistics, hospitality, on a budget of between $15 and $30 million, raised almost entirely through sponsorship, from companies that want their logo on a motorcycle, traveling at 360 kilometers per hour, in front of a global television audience, the Dorna relationship. Here is the commercial architecture that makes MotoGP function as a business, and that most fans have never heard of. Dorna Sports is a Spanish company that owns the exclusive commercial rights to the MotoGP World Championship. It negotiates the television deals, the race hosting fees, the sponsorship of the championship itself, and it distributes a portion of that commercial revenue to the teams through appearance fees. A team that participates in the MotoGP World Championship receives from Dorna an annual payment that is estimated between $3 and $8 million. Depending on the team's historical performance, its classification as a factory or satellite operation, and various other factors negotiated privately, this Dorna payment, this guaranteed income from simply showing up at every race, is the financial foundation that makes satellite team economics viable. It is the equivalent of the Concord Agreement distribution in F1, but at a lower scale and without the historical complexity of the F1 payment structure, the sponsorship crisis. Here is the most significant economic challenge facing MotoGP satellite teams in 2026, and the one that is quietly threatening the viability of several operations on the grid: sponsorship. The primary revenue source for every independent team is harder to secure than at any point in the sport's recent history. The traditional sponsors that funded motorcycle racing for decades, tobacco companies, have been progressively restricted from motorsport advertising. The cryptocurrency sponsors that replaced some of that tobacco money in the early 2020s collapsed spectacularly. FTX, which sponsored multiple motorsport teams, went bankrupt in 2022, taking sponsorship commitments with it. And the traditional financial services and consumer goods companies that might fill that gap are increasingly sophisticated in their evaluation of sponsorship return on investment, and increasingly skeptical that a logo on a satellite MotoGP motorcycle delivers sufficient exposure to justify a $5 million annual investment. The result is that satellite teams in 2026 are operating with smaller sponsorship packages, more numerous smaller sponsors, more complex activation requirements, and thinner margins than at any point in the sport's modern history. The rider salary paradox. Here is the economic tension that every satellite team manager navigates across every contract negotiation. The riders who attract the most sponsorship, the most charismatic, the most successful, the most social media active, are the riders who cost the most to sign, and the riders who cost the least to sign are the riders who attract the least sponsorship, which means a satellite team that commits to a budget rider to save money on salary often loses more in reduced sponsorship attraction than it saved on the salary itself. The mathematical optimum. The rider salary that maximizes net team revenue after sponsorship impact is almost impossible to calculate precisely and represents one of the most consequential judgment calls in team management. The rider injury economics. Here's the risk that has no equivalent in any other professional sport. Economics we have covered in this series. MotoGP riders fall off motorcycles regularly at speeds that would be immediately fatal in almost any other physical context. And when a team star rider is hospitalized, which in MotoGP happens to virtually every top rider at some point during the season, the economic consequences can be severe. A title sponsor whose logo was prominently displayed on a motorcycle that is now in a transport case while its rider recovers in a hospital may reasonably question the value of their investment. And while most sponsorship agreements have clauses protecting the team's revenue in case of injury, the relationship damage from an extended absence by the team's marketing asset can affect renewal negotiations in ways that contract clauses cannot fully protect against. The manufacturer power dynamic. Here is the economic vulnerability that every satellite team carries, regardless of its commercial success. The machinery they depend on does not belong to them. A satellite team that has successfully built a sponsorship portfolio, a paddock hospitality operation, a social media presence based around equipment provided by a manufacturer can see the entire foundation of that business threatened if the manufacturer decides to reallocate its equipment to a different satellite partner, or to bring the satellite operation in-house as a factory team, or to change its technical partnership terms in ways that alter the economics of the relationship. This manufacturer dependency creates a power imbalance that shapes every significant decision a satellite team makes, from the public statements team managers make about their machinery, to the riders they sign, to the geographic markets they prioritize for sponsorship, because everything is built on equipment that can be withdrawn. Here is what the complete economics of a satellite MotoGP team look like in 2026. Annual revenue from title sponsorship, $8 million. Secondary sponsorships, $6 million. Dorna appearance fees, $5 million. Licensing and merchandise, $1 million. Total revenue, $20 million, against annual costs of machinery lease and parts, $12 million. Two rider salaries combined, $3 million. Team personnel and operations, $4 million. Travel and logistics across 20 races, $2 million. Total costs, $21 million. Annual deficit, $1 million, which the team covers from the personal resources of its principal, or from finding the additional sponsorship that makes the difference between a sport and a business. Here's the honest truth about the economics of MotoGP team ownership. The factory teams are making a calculated brand investment that they can justify through motorcycle sales data and market share analytics. The satellite teams are running one of the most precarious businesses in professional sport, dependent on manufacturer goodwill they do not control, sponsorship from a market that has never been more competitive, revenue from a promoter that determines their payment unilaterally, and the health of riders who face physical risk at every race weekend. And yet, the MotoGP paddock, with its extraordinary machines and extraordinary riders and extraordinary drama, continues to attract people who want to own a team, because the economics of passion, the specific financial calculation of someone who loves motorcycle racing, are not always the same as the economics of a rational investor. And perhaps that is the most honest thing that can be said about any motorsport economics. You have been decoded. If this video made you think about MotoGP completely differently the next time you watch a race, subscribe to Money Decoder 3004 every single week. We decode the economics of the sports and businesses that most people experience as fans, and most investors never fully understand. Simply, honestly, and clearly, drop a comment below. Do you think owning a satellite MotoGP team is a viable business? Or is it purely a passion project that happens to have commercial elements? Tell me below. I read every single comment, and I will see you in the next decode.